morning. Thank you for joining us for the Southern Illinois Community Foundation's Third Thursday Roundtable. This roundtable is part of our nonprofit network where we strive to increase the capacity of our nonprofit organizations in the 17 southernmost counties of Illinois. Our role is to assist nonprofit organizations as they carry out services that enhance the quality of life in Southern Illinois. We do this by offering training and professional development for nonprofit board members, staff, and volunteers, increasing coordination, efficiency, and effectiveness of nonprofits and the resource providers who serve the nonprofit sector, conducting timely research in the nonprofit sector, providing opportunities for networking and informal discussions among community leaders such as this. And most importantly, planning a community day of giving called Give SI that benefits over 100 local charitable organizations. If you joined us in 2021, you know that we raised over $178,000 for local organizations, all in a 30-hour giving window. Very impressive. This morning, we have invited Michael Frerichs, Illinois State Treasurer, and Alex Armour, Director of the Charitable Trust, to join us. As a courtesy, please make sure your microphone is muted. We're going to host a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, and we're also going to have someone monitoring the chat box if you need any technical assistance. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Great. Well, good afternoon. So, Michelle, thank you very much for the introduction. I also want to thank CEO and President of the Southern Illinois Community Foundation, Byron Fager, for his leadership, and Michelle Snyder for putting today's event together. But just over 3 years ago, in January of 2019, Byron and I got together at the United Way in Marion on a very chilly morning to talk about Charitable Trust and how we can leverage Charitable Trust to assist the nonprofit community in Southern Illinois. Since then, our office and the Southern Illinois Community Foundation have been working together to spread the word about Charitable Trust and support the work of the vital nonprofits in the area. I was honored to speak at Southern Illinois Community Foundation's Philanthropy Speaks event in November of that year. Now, a lot has changed since then. And while we would like to gather in person, I'm glad to be able to at least address you all virtually today and to say that although the pandemic has kept us apart, where I live in central Illinois, the impending winter storm and ice and snow probably also would have kept me remotely today. Now, as treasurer, one of my main responsibilities is looking after the state's funds and investing them in a safe and responsible manner. Additionally, we make it our mission to reunite unclaimed property with the people who it belongs to. And our office has made great strides in making that process easier. Now, we've also made great strides in returning money to nonprofits and encourage anyone on this call to go to illinoistreasurer.gov and see if we have money that belongs to you or your organization. In addition, in our office, we administer award-winning Best in the Nation college savings plans to help you save for your children and grandchildren's future. We are leading the way in the country by providing one of the first public retirement savings plans to combat the huge problem of a lack of retirement savings, helping more people be able to retire with dignity and enjoy their golden years. My office has also led the way in creating a nationwide program to help people and parents of people with disabilities save money without jeopardizing the support they need so that they can live full, meaningful lives. And I also have the great privilege of administering a small grant program that has supported organizations here in Southern Illinois and across Illinois. So the reason we're here today is our Charitable Trust Fund. And what is that, you might be wondering? And how can Illinois afford it? The Charitable Trust Stabilization Fund assists small nonprofits with annual budgets of $1 million or less. Money comes from filing fees nonprofits pay when filing annual paperwork with the state of Illinois. It does not come from personal or property tax dollars. The program is funded by nonprofits and is put in place by nonprofits to help smaller nonprofits that often struggle to keep their doors open. Knowing the financial hardships that so many nonprofits face, after the program sat dormant for 10 years, we thought it was a good time to reinstate the program and do our part to help keep these organizations operating and serving the public. It's a domino effect. I believe that when you invest in people, people will invest in themselves. And in turn, we all benefit from this. The Boys and Girls Club of Southern Illinois, was able to use grant funds to support their after-school and mentorship programs. The Night Shield of West Frankfort received a grant to help with their COVID-19 relief efforts in Franklin County. And with a grant from the Charitable Trust Program, the Community Foundation was able to establish the nonprofit network of Southern Illinois, creating new avenues for collaboration, mutual support, an exchange of best practices, and leadership development for nonprofit leaders. Our office has had the privilege of helping hundreds of organizations across the state feed and house people and give people the skills they need to find good jobs. We know these organizations have always been doing amazing work, but the extent to which the nonprofit community stepped up during the pandemic to help our fellow citizens says a lot about who we really are as a state. We don't always hear these good stories on the news about those of you doing the work day to day to make our state better. But we know you are out there, and we're proud, as we can, to support your mission. We also want to encourage other nonprofit groups to apply for funding. So our current Charitable Trust application window began January 2nd this year and runs through March 31st of this year. So still over about a month and a half to apply. You can find our online application and more information on our website. It's illinoistreasurer.gov. So I'll just leave you with a few facts about Charitable Trust. We've had 20 committee meetings since August of 2016 when we set this up. This is the 10th grant cycle we're going through. We've had about 583 applicants. 173 grants have been awarded for a total of more than $3.5 million. They've gone out to charities in 59 municipalities, 30 counties around our states, and tens of thousands of lives have been impacted for the better. We know, or I know, that when we partner with smaller nonprofits, you guys make things work because you have a lot of volunteers in your community. You receive donations from your community. And when we're able to put grant money into your organizations, we get a lot greater bang for our buck. We're able to stretch a dollar a lot further than when the state of Illinois does something by themselves. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I have a little while to be on this call, and maybe I might want to take, if there are questions for me, I'd be happy to take them now, because I'm going to turn them over to Alex Armour, and then I have a board meeting. It's a national board I serve on that's supposed to begin at 11:30, and I've got to do just a little bit of prep before that. So if there are questions strictly for me, I'm happy to take them. If not, Alex Armour runs the Charitable Trust Grant Program in my office, and he'll be able to answer far more questions than I can.
Thank you very much, Treasurer. Byron, do you want to say a few words about your experience with the program before I start the presentation, or do you want me to just go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, I'll just take a second and thank you, Treasurer Frerichs. Certainly, this is the grant that we did receive in 2019, and we started with Philanthropy Speaks, grew into what has become the nonprofit network. And so we would not be here today had we not taken that first chance to apply for this Charitable Trust grant and it being awarded it, because that's what allowed us to start putting the framework together to what we now do on a third Thursday every month, and we do through other training sessions. And certainly we're looking forward to the day where maybe we can bring people together and actually be in the same room together, because we know there is the ability to communicate and network and help us find more solutions to help here in Southern Illinois with our nonprofit. So I can definitely say that it changed the way that we did some of our work here in Southern Illinois at the Community Foundation, and a few of the others that you've noted as well. You mentioned Tina Carpenter, and she sent her welcome, but she in fact got called to a board meeting as well this morning that had to go to. So otherwise she would have been here to talk about the same way that they were able to use it to do something that they otherwise didn't have that chance to get started with. So it is a great opportunity to try to get something started that we otherwise don't have funding to do. So we greatly appreciate that and are glad to be able to be here today and hopefully get others here in Southern Illinois to do the same thing that we did.
Thank you so much, Byron. I also just want to recognize John Steve from the Heron House of Hope, who has hosted us before and helped us spread the word about our program. And I also saw that we had a representative from Dispute Resolution, Inc., which was another one of our charitable trust grantees. So today I'm going to go over some of the details of our program, hopefully answer questions that you might have about our process. I'm going to walk you through that process and show you what you're going to need to apply to our program. And then I'll be available to answer any questions that you might have. So can everybody see my screen? Seeing some nods. All right, great. So my name is Alex Armour. I'm the Charitable Trust Director for State Treasurer Michael Frerichs. Was fortunate enough to come in with Treasurer Frerichs when he started this program, or when he started his term almost 8 years ago. And when we started, we did a full review of all the programs in our office. And like the treasurer said, we were kind of surprised to find this charitable trust program that had existed for quite some time and was accumulating money, but had never put together a process, never had an application, had never issued any grants to any nonprofits in the state of Illinois. And when we saw that, we just decided that it was time for us to roll up our sleeves and get to work, because obviously the program was not helping anybody and not living up to its intended purpose by just sitting there. So we put together a committee and a process, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So currently we are accepting applications through March 31st of this year. Our application began January 2nd. We'll also be accepting applications later on this year from July 1st through September 30th. The applications are completed online through an online application portal that you can access through the Charitable Trust website on the Treasurer's page, and that's ilcharitabletrust.com. And we'll share all these links and my contact information and hopefully send around this presentation so you guys have all that information. So we'll get that to you. And so we're currently accepting applications now through March 31st. And once that application period is over, the staff of the Treasurer's Office will review each and every application for completeness and to make sure that the application lines up with our grant focus areas, which we will go over. Now, if we find some small issues with the application, 1 or 2 pieces of missing paperwork or one question that wasn't completed to our satisfaction, we're going to reach out to the applicant and let them know that we need some changes and that they'll have a short period of time to make those changes, because we really don't want to just disqualify anybody for the sake of it. We really want to work with applicants to make sure that you get all the information in so that you can be considered by the committee. And once we get all that information in from those applicants that we request extra information for, we send that information over to our committee. And our committee, which we'll go over shortly, is made up of 11 folks who have great backgrounds and really spend a lot of time reviewing all of our applications. The committee ultimately scores these applications, and we rely on the committee to do that scoring in an impartial and fair basis. And we take the top 10 scored finalists and we move them forward in our process. Those finalists will be announced at our June committee meeting on June 2nd. And the fall finalists will be announced in our December meeting on December 1st. Prior to being awarded a grant, all finalists will need to have a site visit. Hopefully we'll be able to conduct those in person. Obviously for a time we were doing them virtually. This summer we were able to get out there in person a little bit, but obviously we've been kind of back closed down for a little bit. And once the site visit is completed and everything's to satisfaction, we move on with the process and we get a grant agreement to the grantee. Typically the grant term is going to start mid-September. It will be a 1-year grant term. And then the payment will be issued along with the receipt of the grant agreement. We do the payment in two segments. We'll give you 60% of the grant upfront. And then during the course of the grant, we ask for 2 reports. One report is going to be due at the 6-month mark, and then there'll be another report that will be due at the end of the grant term. Once we receive the first report at 6 months and everything looks good, then we release the second installment of the payment. And like I said, it will be a 1-year grant term. And then grantees would be eligible to reapply 1 year after the end of the grant term. So if you are awarded a grant as part of our current grant cycle, that grant term will likely start in September of this year and run through September of 2023. And that means the organization would be eligible to apply in September of 2024. Okay, moving on. I just want to go over the makeup of our committee real quick. We have 11 members of our committee. 5 of those people are appointees from different government agencies, different state government agencies, an appointee from our office, from the Attorney General's office, from the Illinois Lieutenant Governor's office, from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, as well as from the Department of Financial and Professional Regulations. And then our office, State Treasurer's Office, gets to appoint 6 private citizens, and we try to do a good job of appointing people that represent the diversity of the state, and also people who have a real solid background in nonprofits, philanthropy, social service agencies, people who understand what nonprofits need and also what a good nonprofit looks like. These are the people who go over all our applications, and they spend a lot of time doing it. So, you know, we rely on these people to do about, Mike Tyson is waiting. All right, we better let him in. So just going over our appointees, our newest appointee is Joan Dixon, who is the former head of the CEO, the former CEO of the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois. So somebody who Byram knows, who also spoke at the Philanthropy Speaks event back in November 2019. Andreessen Brown, who works for the Spencer Foundation. It's a philanthropy. And he was previously the CFO of Forefront, which is another organization that you guys are aware of. We also had Forefront participate in that event back in 2019 as well. We have Dale Morrissey, who founded a social service agency for adults with developmental disabilities and recently semi-retired, and we're lucky to have him on the committee. Butch Trusty is a manager of the Bridgespan Group, which is another philanthropy organization. And then finally, who unfortunately could not join us today because she is teaching a government class at this very moment, is the former Lieutenant Governor, Honorable Sheila Simon, out of Carbondale. So we're real proud of this committee and proud of the work that they do. And we feel really good about the process that we have in place. Our committee also helped us to establish the focus areas that we currently have and have had for the extent of our grant program. And when this legislation was originally written, it spoke of any nonprofit in the state of Illinois. And that provides real challenge for our committee because it's almost impossible to judge the good works being done in all these different areas against each other. To say an arts organization versus an animal shelter versus a senior organization versus a health organization. So the committee decided to focus on these kind of areas of basic human needs, right? Food, housing, and a job. So that's how we arrived at our focus areas. And as you can see, these are general, very general categories. So under food, food pantries, school feeding programs, summer feeding programs, SNAP outreach, farmers market expansion, and access to fresh produce. Under housing, short-term housing, emergency support to prevent homelessness, foreclosure prevention, accessibility, and we've also worked with housing advocacy organizations in the past. And then again, under workforce and economic development, a very general category, small business development councils, entrepreneurship training, resume preparation, GED classes, vocational training, workforce development for people with developmental disabilities. If you can make the case to us that the area that you focus on is kind of touches on one of these, we're going to work with you to make sure that you qualify. We, again, don't want to turn anybody away. Obviously, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if you have a question, reach out. I can talk to you about some of the previous organizations that have been awarded grants, and perhaps there's some overlap with the work that your organization is doing. All right, now we're getting into the really, really exciting stuff. This is This is thrilling, edge of your seat information. We're going to go over all sorts of exciting government forms that you submit to the federal and state government. So just strap in and get ready. So in order to be eligible, you need to be incorporated as a profit with the IRS as a 501c3. You need to be organized under the Illinois General Not-for-Profit Corporation Act. And then you also need to be domiciled in the state of Illinois and provide charitable services exclusively in the state of Illinois. We also require that you have a full-time equivalent. And that means that we want somebody at the organization 40 hours a week. So if you have one full-time employee at 40 hours, you have a part-time executive director at 20 hours and a program manager at 20 hours, or 4 people at 10 hours. That's how we classify a full-time paid employee. Okay, get a lot of questions on that. Other general criteria: your organization should have an operating budget of $1 million or less. We determine this by looking at one of the forms that you submit. There's a line item on there that says operating charitable expense, and that's what we look at. If you're operating a food pantry and you happen to be dealing with lots of in-kind food contributions that puts you over $1 million, we do not count those in-kind food contributions against your organization. Okay, so we've dealt with a lot of food pantries that deal with, $800 million worth of in-kind contributions in food. We don't count that against their budget because their budget is actually a lot smaller, right? You need to have the same non-discrimination policy that the state has. Additionally, because here in Illinois, we don't always have the best reputation of giving out grants fairly, or people have that perception, we decided to add another layer in here that is just going to make sure that these decisions are not in any way influenced by politics. So if you're a person holding an elective office making more than $60,000 a year, that's going to cover state reps, state senators, countywide elected officials, in Chicago, aldermen, mayors of medium-sized cities and up. If you're an elected official and you're involved in a not-for-profit organization, unfortunately, we're not going to look at that organization because we, again, just want to be as fair as possible and really don't want anybody to feel that so-and-so got a grant because of some political connection. One final eligibility note here is that the grant request should not be more than 30% of the organization's budget and should not exceed 25% of overhead costs unless the grant will be used for a one-time expenditure. So if you're purchasing a vehicle, if you're buying a new freezer, if you're doing material maintenance to your facility, then we're not going to count against your budget. But if you are, say, a $50,000 organization, you would not be able to request the full grant award, which for this cycle is $20,000, because that would be more than 30% of your organization's operating budget. Okay. Okay, and then here are the required documents. These 2 documents are submitted to the IRS. Your applicant's current IRS determination letter, or if pending, a 1023 easy, 1023, or 1024. Your most recent Form 990 or 990N, including a Schedule A. Now, the Schedule A is going to include financial information that we need to judge the fiscal health of your organization. Okay, so a lot of people make the mistake of not including the Schedule A, and we just want to point out that that is a required document as part of our application process. In terms of state documents, the following documents will be submitted with the Illinois Attorney General's office. We ask that you submit your charitable organization registration form. That's a CO1 form. Now, a lot of nonprofits filed this form many years ago and no longer have a copy. And we acknowledge that because we've run into this with a lot of applicants. So we'll accept some other forms of verification. for the CL1 form. For example, a letter from the Illinois Attorney General's Charitable Trust Division. We will also accept a screenshot from the Illinois Attorney General's Charitable Lookup, which is an online database that you can look up the name of an organization and you can find your record, show us that you're up to date. We'll accept a screenshot of that. Not every organization that is registered appears in this database because it's an ongoing process and they're always working through a backlog. So if you go and you look yourself up there and you don't find yourself, don't panic. You might still be perfectly registered. You just need to call the office. We'll share that information again, the name of that website and that link as part of this presentation. The CO2 form doesn't really apply to a lot of people. We also kind of typically ask that an organization has been around for at least 3 years before applying so that we can judge the fiscal health of an organization. If you work for an organization that is spun off from a larger organization and are slightly newer than 3 years old, but have some financial records that could speak to the health of your organization, then we would accept that. But typically we are looking for an organization who have been around for at least 3 years. That's why we ask for 3 years of AG 990 IL forms. And this is going to be the key form that we're really spending the most time on looking at to see if your financial data that you've submitted, we ask for a budget from you as part of the application. So we're going to be looking at your budget. We're going to be looking at this AG 990 IL form, and we're going to be looking at your 990 form. And we want to see that those forms are fairly consistent. There's something radically different in one of these forms. That's probably going to be a no-go for us. That probably means that we're not going to move forward in the process because that tells us, that there's an incomplete picture going on. These last two forms, very few applicants have used, and very few applicants seem to need the form IFC and any and all contracts with professional fundraisers. Again, not a lot of organizations use those, but if you do, we're going to ask that you submit them. And then these last few forms are forms that are submitted to the Illinois Secretary of State's office. Your articles of incorporation, a certificate of good standing from the Office of the Illinois Secretary of State, which again, you can obtain online. And I'll share that website with you. And your bylaws with all amendments. The bylaws aren't necessarily submitted individually. They're typically part of the articles of incorporation, but we want them and we have them as an individual item as part of our documentation submission, okay? All right, and then finally, last couple pieces of information that we're looking for, a complete list of all officers with full contact information. We're talking addresses, daytime phone numbers, and email addresses. Really can't stress this enough, include all this information. I really hate when I have to disqualify an organization because they didn't include this and I reached out to them and I said, hey, you need to include this, and they didn't follow up. I again, really don't want to have to tell an organization no for such a small, minor detail, but it is something that we require, so you do need to include it. It's something that I see a lot from organizations where they leave out a phone number, they leave out an email. We need this information because if there is a problem with an executive director, with an organization, we don't get our report, we need to be able to track down somebody that we can hold responsible. And we've had that happen in the 173 grants that we've given out, maybe 2 or 3 times. So it doesn't happen often, but we do need that information. We're also going to ask for a list of the other grants that you've received. All grants, not just grants from the state or the federal government, but also private grants. And then your most recent audited financial statements. I believe it's something like organizations over $300,000 should complete an audit on a semi-regular basis. And if you're an organization that does not file AG 990 or 990 forms on a regular basis due to an exemption, we can accept an organization like that, like a church, but we would need to see audited financial documents in order to move forward, because otherwise we would just have nothing to judge the fiscal health of an organization on. So if you do have an exception for filing those documents, we do need to see audited financial statements. Good. So that is kind of the nuts and bolts and the real detailed stuff. Here is all my contact information. That's my my mobile phone right here, and you can call or text, and I will try to respond as soon as I can. And then the Charitable Trust homepage, ilcharitabletrust.com, will take you right to the landing page on the Treasurer's website that will share all this information with you. And then also where you will go to launch into our online application portal. So we use a third-party vendor to do that. It's called WiseHive. You'll need to log in, create a profile, and then fill out the application. And then the other two links are the websites that I mentioned, where you can look up your organization on the Attorney General's database, and also where you can obtain your Secretary of State good standing. So that's all I got at this point, and really would be very happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Alex, thank you so much for that presentation. I know a lot of questions were asked during that presentation, but we still did have a few in the chat. So I will just call out those people that asked a question in the chat that I don't think got covered during the presentation. And so we will start with Laura. Laura with DNA Angels.
Yes. Okay. What if you don't have a site? That is, well, that's okay. We, I guess, typically would prefer, to have a physical location, but, this is the times that we're living in. A lot of us are virtual. We have worked with after-school youth development programs. For example, an organization in Chicago called America Scores that does youth soccer and, life skills, leadership skills, and also provides food to kids after school and during summer programs. The site visit for that program took place at a soccer field in Douglas Park in the city of Chicago. So, we didn't go to their office. We had a site visit out where the work was taking place. So, not having a physical location is not necessarily a non-starter. Okay, let's see.
Alex,
If the organization's budget is over 1 million, were there any exceptions to being able to qualify besides the in-kind donations? I would ask that you reach out to me and we talk through your individual case and see, like if you're willing to share some of your budget documents with me, I can take a look and see where your qualification cutoff lies.
I think, Alex, you gave the example that if you was a food pantry, so it's basically that pass-through value you don't count, right? So that's where you don't count the money,
Yeah.
depending on how it's used.
That's correct. And also, depending on how an organization qualifies, thinks of their budget, the operating expense might be slightly less than that, while the overall total budget we think of as $1 million. So that line item that we look at is line item 2H on your AG 990 IL form. Okay.
Okay.
and then Betty, I saw you had a question as well that I was interested in. Betty, did you want to ask your question?
Sure.
Thanks.
So I've read the focus areas before I got on the call, but I wanted to do the call just to see if I was wrong. As child welfare agencies, we wouldn't qualify with the focus areas unless I'm missing something. So I wondered if those focus areas, do they stay the same or do they ever change from year to year?
We have typically kept these focus areas as is. During the fall 2020 cycle, we narrowed it down to just food and housing. We also expanded the amount of awards we gave out that cycle because we were just trying to be as responsive as possible to organizations that were on the front line during kind of the start of COVID. And, you guys know how much, of the food boxes and everybody just coming to action, so we kind of just wanted to focus on those particular areas for that one cycle. There has been some talk of perhaps focusing on just one of these areas for each grant cycle over the next 3 grant cycles, so that for example, in fall, we would perhaps just focus on food, and the next one we would just focus on housing, and the next one we just focus on workforce and economic development. But for now, we're going to maintain these focus areas. And if you have a group that's explicitly just for child development, that strictly speaking would not fit under the focus areas. Michelle, you're on mute.
Thank you. Mike, I saw you raised your hand. Could you go ahead and ask your question, please?
Yeah, thank you. I have a quick question. So our organization has only been around 2 years. We just filed our first charitable organization 990 last year. That's not going to give us a track record. Will that exclude us from this grant?
Well, unless you have some other, unless you're part of another organization prior and have some other financial information that we can look at, we do need to wait until we can say, hey, this organization's on good footing. They've been around, they're successful, and they continue to do good work. Because we need to obviously be good stewards of this fund and make sure that these grant funds are going towards, organizations that have established that track record.
Alex, what about an organization that's based in Kentucky but has a location in Illinois?
Yeah, unfortunately, we do need all this paperwork to be Illinois paperwork. We are an Illinois state agency, and so we need to focus exclusively on Illinois organizations.
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Please keep in mind we do have this recorded, and so we will be able to send this out along with Alex's contact information. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to both Byram or myself if there's just some questions on the application that we might be able to help you with, or gathering some of those documents.
Looks like we have a question from Mr. Gibson.
Yes, sir. I'm the founder of Project Die Hard. We're based in Kentucky, but we have all of our Illinois licenses, registrations. We've done everything on the up and up. We've had 20 acres and a 10,000 square foot building donated to us in Makanda, Illinois, that will house 12 single veterans and 2 veterans with their families for up to a year. I've spent 5 years. I already have skill training, therapy, job placement. Everything you talked about is coming to our facility there.
If it's, we need to have an Illinois address on these documents. It's
not a problem.
As long as you're incorporated in the state of Illinois. And the address of the facility is in the state of Illinois, and all your documents reflect Illinois, then it sounds like you would qualify.
And Alex, you were saying earlier you'd have to have an Illinois 990. So like if you're not
That's
filing,
correct. So the addresses on all your forms need to be Illinois, Illinois address, Secretary incorporated in the state of Illinois, and registered with the Charitable Trust Division, Attorney General's office in the state.
Brian, thank you for clarifying that question. All right, do we have anyone else have a question for Alex? Let me just check the chat real quick. Perfect. Again, Alex, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything that you do, the investment that you make in Southern Illinois. It definitely doesn't go unnoticed. We have a lot of organizations that are incredibly thankful for the work that's being done through the Charitable Trust Grant. And again, like you said, this is money that all nonprofits are giving to fund this grant. So it's a great opportunity. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Alex. Again, I will be sharing contact information as well as the PowerPoint, but if you don't have it in a few days, feel free to reach out to me and send me an email.
And Michelle, can I ask Alex one other question unrelated to the charitable trust?
Certainly.
So Treasurer Frerichs mentioned it briefly, but the unclaimed property. So I would, if since we have time, you have a lot of people here. I actually did do that after our meeting when I met you and the treasurer back in 2019, and I think I ended up with $190 for myself. So I do know that works as well. I know you have some other things. So since we have people here, I think that's also a good thing to go ahead and mention if you have time.
Yeah, just our program is called iCash. I think it's something like 1 in 4 people in the state of Illinois have some form of unclaimed property. Nowadays, it's most often going to be in the form of like a cell phone bill rebate or a rebate from your energy company. Maybe you moved and they didn't really do anything to track you down. Back in the day, it used to be the contents of safety deposit boxes, right? And somebody would have a safety deposit box at the local bank and would diligently pay for that over decades. And then maybe that person would pass away and they weren't paying that anymore, but the bank doesn't get to keep that property. They hand it over to the state. And in the old fashioned way would be, we would a couple times a year take out ads, newspapers, and just publish all the property that we had for that area. Nowadays, you could just go online to icash.illinoistreasurer.gov, type in your last name and see what's out there. Really encourage people to do this. Do it, if you have older family members that aren't as tech savvy, might want to help them out with this. A couple times a year, we find a case where somebody left, tens of thousands of dollars to their church or to the local animal shelter. So if there are other organizations that you work with, encourage you to look those up as well, because you never know what's out there.
Absolutely. I tell you, we kind of did it as a Thanksgiving, everybody's sitting on the couch and we had a game and we kind of started searching for cousins and everybody and said, I found a cousin that has some money left. And it was kind of enjoyable, but it was also something that when we then called our cousins, gave an excuse to talk to and said, hey, you need to log on and get this money that's unclaimed out there. So not related to the charitable trust, but it is something that all of us know people and can, even some of the nonprofits can pass that on to some of their clients. There's no reason to let the money just sit there. And what was the number that since 2015, how much has been returned?
I don't have that number, but it is a large number.
I thought the website the other day said over $1 billion.
Yeah, so. It's with a B, and it's also something that we, the treasurer made a priority. Used to require all sorts of paperwork for smaller claims, and we've gotten rid of that. So I think, if you've got a claim under $200, you can basically just complete the process online. You don't need a notary or anything like that.
Yeah.
Alex, I have one question. For the charitable trust grants, are those done on a regional basis? So for example, do you say we plan to have 3 grants given out in Region 5?
We have talked about kind of trying to figure out a way to do this on a regional basis. It's been challenging because we have a volunteer committee and we get a lot of applications, and it's a concern if we have not enough applications from one region and too many from another region. How would we determine the fairness? So we've just decided to stick with a statewide process while making every effort to reach out to areas outside of Springfield and Chicago, and it's been a real priority for us. Before times I would try to come down a couple times a year at least to the area and talk to organizations. this is one of the first things I heard when I started this program was, what are you going to do to make sure that this is available for people around the state and not just for, the metro areas. So it's something that we try. We always need more applications from this region. And we'd certainly welcome any suggestions to make sure that this program operates as fairly as possible.
Great. And I have one final question. Other than just completeness of the application, are there any tips that you can give the nonprofits who are on this call about what can make their application more appealing? Telling their story, for example, or making sure that their financial documents tell that story. What are some of the tips that you would give people when completing that application?
That's a great question, Michelle. I'm really glad that you asked that. So, keep in mind that we get typically on average around 100 applications each cycle. So far, this cycle is looking like it's going to be maybe our largest application cycle ever, excuse me. So, when you're putting together your application, I would encourage you to be as, brief, not brief, but, there's a saying, brevity is the soul of wit. Try to keep your answers as concise as possible, because the people who are going to be responsible for scoring your application might have as many as 60 or 70 other applications to go through. So that's something to keep in mind. I always think that the organizations that are most successful in the narrative section are ones that share individual stories of success, as well as laying out metrics and showing that we're keeping good track of who's coming and who's going and how much the work that we does has an impact. In terms of just the submitted documentation, I would just love it personally if the documents that you submitted were clearly labeled with the name of your organization and the name of the document, that they would be submitted ideally as a PDF and ideally right side up, so I don't have to rotate the document to view it. But that's all just kind of a personal thing. We review all the applications. It's you don't get points off for not having a PDF or a scan. So just putting that out there.
And are these applications scored on just a general rubric and you just assign points and then the top?
Yeah, the applications are scored. Another great question, Michelle. I'm going to have to update my PowerPoint presentation. I appreciate it. The application is scored on a scale of 0 to 100. The committee scores 95 of those points. We have those areas laid out on our website, how we kind of break the scoring sections up. The largest single scoring section is previous experience, and that's going to count for 25 points. And then there's an additional 5 points that is awarded to an organization if they are located in an economically depressed area. And we define that by looking at the census tract that an organization is headquartered in. So even if you don't have a physical location, we're going to look at the PO box or whatever address you list on your paperwork, and we're going to look at that information on a granular level. We're going to look at that census tract, and we're going to determine what the unemployment is like. We're going to determine what the poverty rate is like, and we're going to determine what percentage of students take advantage of free and reduced school lunches. And so if there's kind of different numbers, I think it's above the statewide unemployment average, 20% poverty, and I think 50% taking advantage of school and reduced school lunches, your organization will automatically be awarded an extra 5 points.
And Alex, those regions, those areas are already defined, correct? Because they're defined in a lot of other state granting opportunities and federal granting opportunities. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Originally, the legislation for this said to look at enterprise zones, and we didn't feel that enterprise zones did a good enough job of getting the core of this issue. of looking at economically depressed areas, because there are enterprise zones all across the country, or excuse me, all across the state. Some of them are in very depressed areas. Some of them might have been depressed 20 years ago and aren't as much anymore. And some of them are just industrial areas that don't really have a lot of people living in them. So it's not necessarily the best metric to go by. So this is what the state looks at when they look at kind of different criteria. This is what the federal government looks at when they're looking at different criteria to measure, poverty and unemployment and whatnot.
Okay, great. And Laura had a fantastic question. Laura, would you like to unmute and ask your question? If not, I'm more than happy to ask it for you.
Yes, thank you. I actually didn't realize I was sending that to you private message. Yes, do you have any advice for a nonprofit that serves clients nationwide and not just the state of Illinois? We are located in the state of Illinois, but I serve the entire country.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are lots of different opportunities out there through the state that aren't necessarily exclusive to the state like ours are. There's also, federal grant opportunities. And, depending on the work that you're doing, there's going to be different foundations out there that, will be kind of geared towards the funding work that you do. One thing that I always tell organizations that are looking for funding opportunities is to connect with Forefront. Forefront is a Chicago-based organization, but they do serve as kind of a advocacy organization and clearinghouse for nonprofits in the state of Illinois. They are a membership organization with a sliding scale, but they will allow anybody to use their resources for free. So I would connect with Forefront, and I believe the website is myforefront.org, and they maintain extensive databases and libraries of grant opportunities, and are going to be a good place to go to find out all of the different opportunities that are out there, both public and private.
And just a little plug for
Would you
that
mind
as well. Sorry, Laura.
would you mind
Just a-
spelling that for me?
Yes, myforefront.org.
Thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
Community Foundation actually works with Forefront on a lot of different projects and in a lot of different ways. So it's absolutely something that we can work with someone on if you have questions. A lot of their research into grants, we can help with that as well. We send those up to some research associates with Forefront, and they can help find grant opportunities. Alex, I think the question that I think Laura might be asking is, if you have a nonprofit, let's say that does get started in Illinois, so all the paperwork is filed in Illinois, but they are on a national level. Should they tell their story based on what they do in Illinois or based on what they do as a nationwide project?
Really, we're looking for organizations that are almost exclusively serving the state of Illinois. If you're an organization that is, we got a lot of border towns in this country, in this state, that is a homeless shelter. For example, the organization in Quincy that we work with that is doing a lot of feeding programs. They're obviously going to have people from across the river that come and take advantage of the program. We're not going to penalize them for that. But if the organization does, only 1/50th of its work in the state of Illinois, then that's probably not an organization that we're going to be wanting to engage with the Charitable Trust Grant.
Thank you for that clarification, Alex. Okay, any final questions before we end the call today?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Yashika McKay, and I'm with Midwest Clean Food and Water Movement. And I just had a question about, so you help nonprofits that are based in Illinois, right?
That's correct.
Do you have to have a certain amount of money already? Because we just purchased a piece of land over here. What we do is we feed the elderly, because Illinois over here lost $2.1 million for Meals on Wheels. So what we did was we started creating aquaponics greenhouses and supplying the neighborhoods that are impoverished with free food. So, but right now we just spent our last lump sum providing the last aquaponics greenhouse. So we just got it set up, and I was wondering, could we apply if we don't have any extra cash in our account because we just purchased the greenhouse to feed the elderly with?
So we don't have per se a requirement for the amount of funds that you have to have in order to apply. We do typically work with organizations that have been around for several years.
Well, we've been here since 2018.
Okay, so as long as you have 3 years of AG 990 IL forms that you can
Yes.
submit as part of your application, then sounds like, you know, your organization would be eligible to apply.
Alrighty then. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So if you are on this call and you have not joined us on our Facebook page, please make sure you join Southern Illinois Community Foundation. We list a lot of grant opportunities as well as our Third Thursday calls each month on that page. Those are calls that, of course, you do have to register for, but please feel free to share those as well. You can always find more information on our website at SICF.org. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we really appreciate the investment that you have in Southern Illinois.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for having me. And I really hope that we can do this in person sometime soon, hopefully over the summer. And Byram, it's so wonderful to see you, and I hope you're doing well. And thank you guys all. And we'll make sure to send this presentation around, as well as my contact information. And Brian, I'm going to call you as soon as I get off the phone. Thanks. Take care,
All right,
everybody.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you,
day,
Alex. Thanks, everyone.